We're about to talk about psychometrics, and here's what I'd like you to do. I'd like you to sit back, get a cup of coffee, just like this. I promise you it will make the material we're about to cover a little easier to swallow. We're going to take a closer look at the ORS and the SRS and what statisticians and researchers value about these kinds of measurement tools, tools that have been deemed evidence-based by organizations like the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. You know, there are thousands of outcome tools available. And of all of these tools available, most of them do not pass muster statistically. For example, many organizations, when they go about trying to measure outcome from the clients, they will actually develop their own simple tool. The problem with these homemade instruments is that they lack information about their reliability, validity, feasibility, and something called sensitivity to change. These are three important statistical concepts that allow you to have confidence in the tools that you're about to use. Let's take a look at each of these concepts in a bit more detail, starting with the idea of reliability. Take a look at the definition that's on your screen right now. Actually, the word reliability, when it applies to outcome tools, is exactly the same as in everyday language. It means you can count on this particular tool. Whenever a measure is said to be reliable, we want that tool to be the same from administration to administration. It only measures changes in the variable being assessed. Reliability. The ORS and the SRS have passed that particular hurdle and been shown to be reliable for uses in a variety of clinical settings across a diverse client population. Okay, on to validity. These are all big words that seem so important. But validity really means that a measurement tool measures the construct under study. It actually tells you what you want to know. When a measure is valid, it's giving us information about what we need to know. And in this particular case, we have two things we need to know about. We need to know about outcome. Is the client making progress? And we need to know about the quality of the relationship. The SRS measures that particular variable. Again, multiple studies have shown that the ORS and the SRS are valid measures of the alliance and outcome. Feasibility. Now, this is usually an idea that is passed over by researchers. They really don't care as much about feasibility as you do. You work in the real world. You need a measurement tool that doesn't take a huge amount of time and doesn't create a burden for your client to complete. So you're looking for a tool that takes less than, researchers say, about 5 minutes to complete. If a tool takes more than 5 minutes, we have ample evidence that clients and helpers find ways around those particular tools. In the studies done with the ORS and the SRS, most find that these two tools take in combination less than 5 minutes to administer, complete, and score. Reliability, validity, and feasibility. These are three important statistical concepts that we look at when trying to choose a tool to measure some particular construct with. In our case, outcome and alliance. Now, there is a fourth idea, and that is sensitivity to change. And this has become important recently because most outcome tools, most tools that are used in research on psychological treatments, were not designed to be sensitive to change. They were in fact designed to be stable, to reflect enduring qualities or characteristics of the person that was completing the particular measure. For example, the MMPI or the Rorschach. These don't change very much because they're supposed to measure long-term enduring qualities, as I said. An outcome tool, however, one that's designed to measure progress, has to be sensitive to any changes that result from the treatment offered. Take a moment, think that through. If a tool isn't sensitive to change, if, for example, whoever fills it out, their scores change from visit to visit, we can't with confidence say that the changes are a result of the intervention being delivered. The SRS and the ORS are tools that have been shown to be sensitive to change in a treated population, but stable in an untreated population. It allows us, therefore, to say any changes on those particular tools are attributable to the constructs being assessed. Okay, by now you've both seen and used the ORS and SRS, and if you've used similar tools in the past, you probably have noticed that they're a bit different. They're both known as visual analog tools. A visual analog tool converts a construct into a simple visual equivalent. In this particular case, on all two measures, it's a straight line. It's a little bit like your wristwatch, which is also a visual analog tool. And so these particular tools, the SRS and ORS, have shown to be as valid and reliable as much longer and cognitively complex instruments. For me, when I first started doing outcome measurement in my clinical practice, I was using more complicated scales, scales that came in at the 11th grade reading level. That prevented the measures from being applicable to a large number of the people that I worked with. The ORS and the SRS have a reading level of about 6th grade. The children's versions come in at the 2nd grading reading level, making them applicable to a much broader range of consumers of behavioral health services. The ORS, the Outcome Rating Scale, is the name of the form that is applicable for people from ages 13 and older. There's also a children's version that is applicable to ages 6 to 12, the CORS, or Children's Outcome Rating Scale. Finally, the third and last ORS is the YCORS. If you've taken a look at it, you'll see it simply has 4 faces. The child circles or colors in the face that best fits their experience about how they're feeling about their lives. That particular version of the outcome rating scale is not scoreable, but it does importantly give young people an opportunity to give some feedback about the service that they're receiving. Why is that important? Well, because of research which shows that dropout rates are higher among young kids. Secondly, we also know that the more we ask young kids for feedback, the more engaged in the process they are and the better their outcomes become. Now, you may be wondering, what do I do if I am administering services or meeting people in a group context? It's a really very good question. The answer is you use whatever ORS form is applicable to the age group that you're working with. So if you're working with adults doing group therapy, then you would use the ORS. Simply pass out the measure to the group, have them fill in the form and complete it. Here's a little tip, actually teach them how to score it and plot the scores themselves on the graph that accompanies the measure. Then you can simply start the group by asking where people's scores are at. And if you've met them more than once, asking them whose scores have been going up, whose scores have stayed the same, whose scores have deteriorated. Take a look at the graph that's on your screen right now. It's roughly similar to the graph that you get when you download the measures from one of the websites on which they're available. If you look at that graph, you're going to see a heavy dashed line at a score of 25. That particular score is known as the clinical cutoff for the ORS. There's one about the SRS, we'll get to that later. The clinical cutoff, what is that? This is the dividing line between what we might call a normal and a clinical population. If you're scoring above 25, then the person completing the tool is saying that their life is relatively good, that they are not distressed. If their score is 25 or lower, then they're saying that they could use some help of some kind. Really, that clinical cutoff serves as a reference point then for evaluating the level of distress that the person seeking help has at the moment. How was the clinical cutoff for the ORS determined? Well, we used a very large sample and a method outlined by 2 researchers, Jacobson and Truax, back in the 90s. The sample included about 35,000 different clients, and the numbers come up in the following way. The clinical cutoff for the adults is, as I said, 25. For adolescents, 28, and for kids, 32. As you can see, the cutoff for kids is a little bit higher. They rate their lives more favorably. If you're an adult, you understand this. The clinical cutoff can really be a useful indice for your work. The average intake score, for example, in a typical community mental health setting is about 19. In other words, below 25. This is a group of people who are saying that their life is full of some level of distress that mandates, that pushes them to seek help. Interestingly enough, about 1/3 of people who complete the tool at their very first visit will score above that clinical cutoff. You may be wondering, well, why would they come to talk to you then? That's exactly the right question to ask. Why are you coming to talk with me? How can I help you? And usually there are 2 reasons why somebody presents to a helping professional but scores above the clinical cutoff. The first one is that they may have been forced into treatment by someone else. a parent, school officials, an employer, a partner, family member, etc. But a second and also important reason is that they may be presenting with a single issue or problem that doesn't really affect their overall life functioning. In my clinical experience, oftentimes people who have a phobia will score above the clinical cutoff. In truth, their life is really pretty good, except for that one little problem. By doing this, it allows me to focus my efforts and to target that specific issue, rather than doing a more general psychotherapy intervention or diagnostic workup. Either way, whatever the client's score, it's important to talk with them about the meaning of that particular score. Why are they looking for your help at this particular time?